Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. Cash remittances surged to $2.92 billion in January, a crucial boost for the economy. What's behind the increase and what does it mean for growth? Solicitor General Guevarra refuses to step down even after withdrawing from the government's defense in former President Duterte's ICC case. What comes next in this political battle? And a new wave of airstrikes hits Gaza, leaving hundreds dead. With global markets watching, could this escalating conflict drive oil prices higher? All these stories and more coming up. First, let's take a look at how financial markets performed overnight. U.S. stocks dropped on Wall Street as investors turned cautious ahead of the Federal Reserve's monetary policy decision, while also assessing the impact of President Donald Trump's tariff policies. The Fed is set to release its latest policy statement on Wednesday, with markets widely expecting the central bank to keep interest rates unchanged.
I think part of this market move here is a matter of people looking at they're overpositioned in some of the areas that there's some concerns with. Tariff uncertainty has not been a great thing. I think people are worried about what's going to happen.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average is lower by 0.6%, the S&P 500 down by 1.1%, and the Nasdaq sharply lower by 1.7%. Over in Europe, markets are up. The UK's FTSE higher by 0.3%, Germany's DAX higher by 1%, and France's CAC 40 at higher by 0.5%. Cash remittances rose to $2.92 billion in January. That's a 2.9% increase from the same month last year. Latest data from the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas shows that the growth was driven by higher inflows from Saudi Arabia, the United States, Singapore, and the United Arab Emirates. Now, what does this mean for the Philippines? Strong remittance inflows continue to support household spending, a key driver of economic growth. However, with the peso under pressure from global rate differentials, the BSP may have to balance remittance-led consumption with inflationary risks. The government's budget surplus shrinks to 68.4 billion pesos in January as public spending accelerates during the period. Data from the Bureau of Treasury shows this is lower than the 88 billion pesos surplus recorded in the same month last year. The nearly 20% jump in government spending, totaling almost 400 billion pesos, was driven by infrastructure projects, health and social protection programs, and preparations for the 2025 midterm elections. Accelerated government spending could boost economic growth, but a shrinking budget surplus raises questions about fiscal sustainability. With revenue collection under pressure, the government will need to balance spending with debt management to maintain a stable fiscal position. Now, the Philippines moves up in economic freedom, now classified as a moderately free economy. Data from the Heritage Foundation's Global Index on Economic Freedom shows the Philippines ranks 82nd out of 184 countries this year, with a score of 60.6, improving from 88th place last year when it was categorized as mostly unfree. The think tank notes that the Philippine economy continues to expand despite global challenges. Government reforms have also helped improve business conditions and strengthen the private sector. The higher ranking signals progress in making the economy more business-friendly, but corruption remains a major roadblock to long-term growth. The challenge now is to build on these gains to ensure economic freedom translates to more investments, jobs, and sustainable development. On another front, Solicitor General Guevarra refuses to step down despite controversy over his decision not to defend the government in a Supreme Court petition filed by the Dutertes. Guevarra says his future in the post is up to President Bongbong Marcos, who will decide whether or not he stays. Meanwhile, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro is questioning his ability to remain as Solicitor General. Guevarra, a former law partner of ex-Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, is under scrutiny as Medialdea joins former President Duterte's legal team in his case before the International Criminal Court. Legal uncertainty at the highest levels of government raises questions about political stability and the rule of law. The Solicitor General plays a key role in cases involving business regulations, government contracts, and foreign investment disputes. With political divisions taking center stage, businesses and investors will be watching closely to see how this shapes the country's legal and business climate moving forward. Malacanang says it will be up to the Anti-Money Laundering Council, or AMLC, to decide whether to freeze the assets of former President Rodrigo Duterte if requested so by the International Criminal Court. Presidential Communications Office Undersecretary Claire Castro confirms the AMLC has full authority over such decisions and will determine the next steps. She also states that the government remains committed to ensuring reparations for victims of Duterte's war on drugs. This case puts the spotlight on the country's financial regulatory systems, testing the independence of the AMLC and the government's handling of high-profile financial investigations. With the Philippines successfully removed from the FATF gray list, the focus now shifts to maintaining global confidence in its anti-money laundering framework. How the government responds could impact foreign investor sentiment, cross-border transactions, and the country's long-term reputation as a secure financial market. Businesses will also be monitoring whether this case triggers any broader policy changes in financial regulation or international cooperation. The Duterte camp is expanding its legal team as former President Rodrigo Duterte prepares for a possible trial at the International Criminal Court in The Hague, Netherlands. With international scrutiny growing, questions arise over the implications for the Philippines' business and investment climate, particularly in relation to global financial transparency and the rule of law. Hannah T. reports.
Strong defense. That's how Nicholas Kaufman describes the legal strategy being built for former President Rodrigo Duterte, who faces crimes against humanity charges in the ICC. Kaufman is the first confirmed lawyer on Duterte's legal team, a seasoned international lawyer with a degree from the University of Cambridge and over 3 decades of experience in international law. In an interview, Kaufman said Duterte is still finalizing his defense team, and it may take a week to complete. According to Vice President Sara Duterte, they're looking to add another lawyer to the team. In a media interview in The Hague, VP Sara confirms that once the legal team is complete, former Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea will step aside to make room for counsel with experience in ICC proceedings. Medialdea is one of Duterte's closest allies who had to be rushed to a hospital. He fell ill during a visit to Duterte at the ICC detention center. The Philippine Embassy in the Netherlands confirms he has received medical care and is recovering. Senator Robin Padilla says Medialdea had been under immense pressure and had not slept for days.
Kahit na sinong kaibigan, maapektuhan ka. Ganyan po siguro ang nangyari kay ES. Tinamaan na rin ng siyempre nangyari kay Mayo.
Although accredited as counsel before the ICC, former presidential spokesperson Harry Roque is also not part of Duterte's legal team. The Duterte camp wants him to focus on his asylum application in the Netherlands.
That would not. There's a whole procedure that I need to comply before they give me proof that I am an asylum seeker and a temporary residence in the Netherlands as soon as they receive my application for asylum.
Roque left the country amid a congressional contempt order and is yet to face trafficking charges in relation to Pogos. VP Sara told the media the camp wants to avoid complications by keeping the legal team focused on Duterte's case. She adds all lawyers of her father will be foreign nationals. Kaufman is no stranger to the ICC. He defended former Ivorian leader Charles Blé Godet, who was acquitted of crimes against humanity in 2019. He also represented Mohamed Said Abdelkani, a Central African Republic militia leader, charged with war crimes. Before his work at the ICC, Kaufman was a prosecutor for the Israeli Ministry of Justice, handling cases involving war crimes and genocide. His next major case, defending Duterte. Hannah T., Bilyonaryo News Channel.
A lawyer accredited by the International Criminal Court says former President Rodrigo Duterte still has a path to challenge the ICC's jurisdiction over his case. Attorney Joel Butuyan, president of the Center for International Law, told BNC's On Point that the ICC can reverse its decision if a legal challenge proves that a procedural error was made. He explains that the responsibility to question the court's jurisdiction now falls on Duterte himself, not the Philippine government.
This issue on jurisdiction was previously submitted by the Philippine government, no? And it reached all the way to the appeals chamber. But the appeals chamber of the ICC in a very close 3-2 vote sustained the jurisdiction of the ICC. Now, since it's Mr. Duterte now who is in the case, he can again challenge the issue of jurisdiction, because he's not bound by the previous ruling, because that actually was it involved the Philippine government at that time.
This legal challenge adds uncertainty to the case with potential political and diplomatic impacts. High-profile international disputes can affect investor confidence, foreign relations, and the country's rule of law, key factors in long-term business stability. Investors will be watching closely for any impact on policy continuity and the Philippines' global standing. A police officer now faces an inciting to sedition complaint after using Facebook Live and social media posts to urge fellow officers to rise against the government and oppose the possible arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte. The PNP identifies him as Patrolman Francis Steve Fontillas, who has been absent without official leave since last March 6th. Authorities assure the public that the case will be handled with transparency and due process. Meanwhile, Malacanang reminds uniformed personnel to exercise caution in their use of social media.
Alam po natin na pagka-uniform personnel, dapat po impartial at non-partisan. So, doon pa lamang po ay may violation na po siya. So, kung ano po yung nararapat na kung meron man pong pagdidisiplina o parusa, siguro dapat lang pong ibigay.
President Bongbong Marcos's performance and trust ratings declined in February, according to the latest Pulse Asia survey. The survey, which was conducted from February 20th to the 26th, shows that 42% of the respondents approving of President Duterte's performance, down from 51% in January. His trust rating also dropped from 49% to 42%. Meanwhile, Vice President Sara Duterte's performance rating rose slightly to 52% compared to 50% in January. Her trust rating also inched up to 53%. The survey was conducted more than 2 weeks after her impeachment at the House of Representatives. Now, what does this mean for the business community? Shifts in public trust ratings can impact investor sentiment and policy confidence. A weaker approval rating may also signal political uncertainty, affecting the government's ability to push key economic reforms. Meanwhile, the Vice President's rising ratings, despite her impeachment, highlight continued political divisions that could influence the business climate, investor confidence, and policy stability moving forward. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Let's take a look at how Asian bourses are faring this Wednesday morning. Right now, the Nikkei 225 is higher by 0.5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is in the red, lower by 0.4%. Shanghai's Composite in the red as well, about as much as the Hong Kong Hang Seng Index, lower also by 0.4%. Now, over in Singapore, the market is higher, up by 0.5%, just like Japan's Nikkei 225. Now, here at home, recall the PSE Index pulled back on profit-taking yesterday, snapping out of a 3-day rally as investors weighed tariff uncertainties and weak consumer confidence following a soft U.S. retail sales report. Most sectors closed lower, with the mining and property oil sectors bucking the market's downtrend. Now, let's take a look at how our market is doing. Early in trading, the PSE index is in the red by 0.5% to 62.55. The broader all shares index is in the green, slightly higher by 0.2% to 37.29. Taking a look at the sub-indices, the financials, holding firms, services, and property counters are in the red, while the industrial and mining and oil counters are currently in the green. And at the foreign exchange market, the peso appreciated at open. The currency opened at 57.25 against its previous close of 57.30. Now, the Philippine economy is expected to reach the lower end of the government's target of 6 to 8% for 2025 and 2026. That's according to the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, or BSP, in its latest monetary policy report. The central bank explains that this is due to elevated global commodity prices and trade uncertainties. Last year, the Philippine GDP expanded by 5.6%, lower than the 6 to 6.5% full-year target range set by the Development Budget Coordination Committee, or DBCC. Now, Malacanang blames unscrupulous local traders for the low farm gate price of palay, accusing them of artificially suppressing prices to maximize profits. In a press briefing, Palace Press Office Undersecretary Claire Castro denied claims that the drop in farm gate prices is linked to increased rice imports, even as the country's harvest season continues. She cited data from Agriculture Secretary Francisco Tiu Laurel Jr., who reported that rice imports have remained low this year. Data from the Philippine Statistics Authority, or PSA, shows that the average farm gate price of palay in February fell to 20 pesos and 29 centavos per kilo, compared to 25 pesos per kilo in the same month last year. The drop in palay prices raises questions about market dynamics and supply chain pressures. Lower farm gate prices can benefit millers and retailers in the short term, but if farmers continue to struggle, it could disrupt production and impact food security in the long run. With the government shifting the blame to traders, regulatory action or price interventions may follow, a key concern for agribusiness players, investors, and consumers watching rice price volatility. Now, the Department of Agriculture is moving to file legal action against agricultural smugglers, intensifying the government's crackdown on illegal imports. Agriculture Secretary Francisco Tiu Laurel Jr. confirmed this following a complaint filed by the Bureau of Plant Industry against JRA and Pearl Enterprises, a firm allegedly responsible for smuggling some 2.37 million pesos worth of fresh yellow onions from China. The shipment arrived at Manila's South Harbor in July of last year without the required sanitary and phytosanitary import clearances. Laurel says that the DA is preparing similar charges against the company and vows to strengthen the government's anti-smuggling drive. Illegal agricultural imports undercut local producers and distort market prices, impacting both farmers and legitimate importers who follow regulations. The government's tougher stance signals tighter enforcement, which could stabilize supply chains and protect local industry. But it also raises questions about how stricter trade oversight may affect import costs and market access for compliant businesses. On another front, property prices in the provinces are surging as demand for houses, lots, and condominiums continues to grow, driven by urban spillover, infrastructure developments, and changing lifestyle preferences. Sujin Kim reports.
The demand for house and lot properties and leisure-themed condos in the provinces is surging, driving prices up at a rapid pace. In Cavite, Laguna, and Batangas, some house and lot projects have seen prices rise by 10 to 20% annually, outpacing the industry average of 3 to 12%. In prime locations like Batangas, Benguet, Cebu, Bacolod, and Iloilo, several condominium developments are nearly sold out.
Much of that price increase is seen outside of Metro Manila. Those are very good locations: Cebu, Pampanga, Cavite, Laguna, Batangas. And I also want to add that it's not just the condominium sector that is recording price acceleration.
In Metro Manila, mid-income condos are seeing a slowdown, but the upscale segment remains strong, with some projects surging by 60 to 90% in value since their launch.
Much of the challenge right now in terms of take-up is, of course, admittedly, coming from the mid-income segment. Why? Because this is the price sector that is most affected by elevated mortgage rates.
As a result, developers are competing through large discounts and longer payment terms to boost sales.
For example, developers offering as much as 40% for spot cash payment. We're now seeing on these very attractive payment terms, and this will likely be the norm moving forward.
Meanwhile, in the office space sector, lease rates continue to decline. Since 2020, prices have dropped by 40%, while office vacancy in Metro Manila remains high at 19.8%.
So if you're leasing office space at 1,000 pesos per square meter before, now it's down to 600 pesos.
Meanwhile, the expected decline in interest rates could revive the residential sector.
Lower interest rates mean lower mortgage rates, and that should help lift demand in the residential sector. The central bank has been cutting interest rates because they want to prop up spending across the country.
Sujin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
The Israeli military releases footage of airstrikes on targets in the Gaza Strip as tensions in the region escalate. Palestinian health authorities report over 400 dead from the latest strikes. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that the attacks are necessary to pressure Hamas into releasing the remaining hostages. Meanwhile, thousands of Israelis gather in Tel Aviv to protest the military action. Hamas continues to hold 59 hostages out of more than 200 taken during its October attacks. Now, what does this mean for global business? With the Middle East a key hub for oil supply, shipping routes, and investor confidence, prolonged conflict raises risks of disruption in global trade and energy markets. Businesses watch closely as geopolitical uncertainty could affect oil prices, currency volatility, and supply chains worldwide. Elsewhere, Russian President Vladimir Putin agrees to temporarily halt attacks on Ukraine's energy and infrastructure targets, following a high-level phone call with U.S. President Donald Trump. The White House confirms technical teams are now working through the details, including discussions on security in the Black Sea, a critical trade corridor for global grain and energy supplies. Ukraine has yet to respond to the agreement, with Kiev previously accusing Moscow of using diplomatic talks as a delaying tactic to stretch the war. For the business community, any pause in attacks could stabilize energy and commodity markets, but the lack of Ukraine's endorsement leaves uncertainty over the deal's longevity. The Black Sea remains a key risk area, with trade disruptions impacting global food security, shipping costs, and oil supply volatility. Billionaire Bill Gates calls on the Trump administration to continue funding global health programs. In a recent meeting with the National Security Council and bipartisan lawmakers, Gates underscores the impact of U.S. health aid, noting that HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria deaths have declined dramatically over the years, proof that global health efforts are working. He stresses that while his foundation remains committed to innovation and funding long-term solutions that require partnerships, strong partnerships between governments, businesses, and philanthropic organizations. Continued support for global health programs not only saves lives, but also drives medical innovation, strengthens healthcare supply chains, and opens opportunities for public-private partnerships. With strong international cooperation, the world is now closer than ever to ending some of the deadliest infectious diseases and building a healthier, more resilient future. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Maiki Oreta. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.